Hi everyone. Just finished up our third class at the regenerative leadership course. I just took some good notes here that I wanted to pass on. Some of the questions that we were answering related to the bomb disposal and horse whisperer examples that we had talked through prior. But the questions that were raised to discuss were, what do you think are enabling conditions for the regenerative agriculture movement? And what are some situations for people to take responsibility for self-education? So some of the talks that this really tied back with actually were kind of about the emotional push, and again that livestock analogy about getting in their flight zone, getting them uncomfortable, backing off, pressure and release kind of thing when you're teaching. You kind of have to get someone out of their comfort zone possibly to learn something new. A couple interesting points here. Frustration tells you that you must learn something. So when we're frustrated, that's a sign that we either are uninformed and we need to change. Another little point here, emotions are a form of intelligence, and they're a flag that points us to what we're passionate about. This actually reminds me of a quote that I really love. It goes like this: Hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are Anger and Courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to ensure they don't stay as they are. So again, that emotion, anger state is not a bad thing. It's pointing us into the direction that we should go. There was a good point made that bomb disposal and agriculture are quite related. High risk game, and we have to think logically like a puzzle. I really did like that. One thing that came up that I wanted to point out was often something that comes up in agriculture challenges has relation to finances. Finances can spark some emotional discomfort when we aren't intelligent enough to discuss these things when there's emotional connections made. And I kind of had a thought that was mentioned of transactions versus transformations. And I feel transactions are the logical side, where transformations are often made in the emotional side. And when we talk about finances, they're just a bunch of individual transactions. But if we're actually going to make a paradigm shift, we need to think more what's right and transform and get really behind those big financial decisions to make a bigger shift. There was discussion made on barriers that are often in the way of discussion, that are often related to power differences. Okay, and that kind of was mentioned through a couple times about the expert that comes into the room often may exhibit some power differences, and we might be hesitant or obstructed to make some change. That level of authority we kind of discussed, or I made the point that sometimes we challenge an expert, but we are more willing to go along with a peer. So that's that different form of authority when we know someone may not have a vested interest that others may in that field. There was two really good charts that Dana passed on to us from the Human Venture Institute regarding adaptive space and complexity awareness. They were two really good graphs that I'm not going to get too deep into, but it just talks about what happens when we get into a very complicated situation. Sometimes we look to that guru for that really simple 1 + 1 is 2 answer, that silver bullet. Sometimes we get into camps saying pro or anti, yes or no, without actually making real change. We ideally want to get into this space for adaptive learning, where we can communicate as a group and maybe not be disagreeable. We might disagree on things, but not be disagreeable. There was some really good points talking about the power of mentorship groups or networking groups, and there was a point made about some grazing clubs that get together, and often what pulls people in is an operational task or a specific thing that we might look at, like a watering system or a fencing project, right? We like to look at the things that are tangible. Once people are all around the room together, that's when we can might targeting these bigger, more complicated things. Once we're all together in the room, that's really the power of networking, getting people together. But sometimes when we jump into the complexities, we can overwhelm people, and we might not want to share some of our vulnerabilities. But getting people together to talk about some fun things, maybe have a few beers involved. That was mentioned that's a really great way to connect and educate. And yeah, no, a couple of points here. Power dynamic was talked about. Can get in the way. To break the shell on people. Sometimes just use some humor. Sometimes be humble that we're not the expert, but we're just trying to share some ideas. And the other point was made is that our mood does make a big difference. Just like the horse whisperer analogy, if we go into things upset or mad, that's going to push off or rub off to others. So let's go into this with an open mind. Anyway, it was a great discussion that we had, and I just wanted to talk things through while they're fresh in my mind. And I'll check out and I'll keep in touch for next week. Take care.